the March 19th, 2024 medical cannabis policy advisory board meeting. Shortly, I'll go through the usual introduction and we have that stuff by channels. All right, this meeting is being held virtually and is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medical Cannabis in Salt Lake City, Utah. Public notice of this meeting is provided as required under Utah's open meeting laws and was posted on the Utah. In compliance with Utah's open meeting law, this meeting is being recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Health website on the business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the approved minute will be posted to the Public Health website within 30 days of this meeting. Approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Health website within 3 business days after the board. The agenda is up to the discretion of the board chair. As a result of board meeting proceedings, agenda items will be removed, skipped over, or pushed to the meeting. Here's some general instructions for making public comment. Public comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time, you must request it from the chair. The chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. A public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create or remove public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. You can look over public comment guidelines that are posted on the Utah Public Health website. Please state when making a public comment, please state your name and your affiliation so it will be reflected in the meeting minutes. Only comments made on items listed on the agenda will be considered. If you have a comment about an item not listed on the agenda, please email them to mcpab@utah.gov. For those making a public comment over Zoom, here's some specific instructions for you all. Zoom public chat will be disabled during Zoom meetings. And if you want to make a comment, you'll need to fill out a comment registration form found on the public website. The chair will indicate when it's time for the public comment period. I will determine when it is your turn. You will then be taken off. Take 2 minutes to make your comment. The chair will then decide whether to take additional comments other than those who fill out the public comment registration form. Use the raise hand icon on Zoom to indicate that you would like to make a comment. If you would like any additional time to make your comment beyond the initial 2 minutes, please ask for that at the beginning and make sure that the chair recognizes that and it's okay. For those making public comment in person, please sign in on the public comment sign-in sheet with your name and indicate what agenda item you want to make a comment. The chair will indicate when it's time for the public comment period. The board chair will call on you when it's your turn and you will come to the public comment table and take 2 minutes to make a comment. Again, if you would like additional time, please request that from the chair prior to making your comments. As a reminder, if you are in person, please do not speak when others are presenting. Our mics are very sensitive and those attending over Zoom cannot hear when there is more than one person talking at a time. Side conversations or comments from the public business board. For additional information, to make a suggestion for agenda items or to contact board members or staff, send an email to mcpab@utah.gov. All right, with that out of the way, we have some minutes to approve for the last 2 meetings that we had. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes for the February 2024 meeting and March 7th, 2020? Does anybody have any proposed changes? Other than the misspelling of Annette's first name, does anybody have any proposed changes to either? Okay.
I will make a motion that we approve the February 2024 minutes.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the February 2024 minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, I find that motion passes unanimously.
I'll make an additional motion that we approve the March 7th, 2024 minutes.
All right, we have a motion to approve the March 7th, 2024 minutes. Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes for March 7th, 2024 meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, I find that motion passes unanimously. All right, we want to turn to some administrative business of the board. I did want to thank everyone for taking time out of their normal schedules to attend the meeting we had on March 7th, and maybe some additional discussion today regarding some things based upon the recommendation we made what's being seen. But I do want to make sure to thank everyone, for their participation. I know it was a bit of a difficult decision to, for us to make, based on some of the lack of data that we had, as well as some of the lack of, science as well. But I appreciate everyone's participation. One thing I did want to bring up, before the meeting, the last week I discussed with Rich Oborn, some ideas around kind of what the role is of board staff. And I wouldn't mind getting some input from our board. I think because we have, board staff and maybe some other boards either don't or have different staff, it's lent itself more to the policy analyst. Trevor has done a fantastic job. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. He's providing great insight and research. He's prepared very professional memos, but I think it really helped us to make, good decisions. But with that said, I think there's a question of, should it be Trevor's role to not only, do all of the research, prepare the memo, and present that at the meeting. I obviously know Trevor is going to have involvement as the board's analyst to do research and potentially prepare and help prepare presentations. But maybe it would be a better idea, for us as we set agenda items to determine, if it's a Q&A issue, for instance. Well, Chris probably is the person who would help lead, that, kind of that discussion. We might have ideas around the research he wants conducted. He may even have, knowledge around how we frame, the issue for board decisions. But also there may be things that come to us from the public. We're going to hear one of those today, right? Regarding collaborative practice, agreements between QMPs and PMPs, and potential to enact that. That might be something that we could have collaboration between the public and a member of the board, or just maybe between the member of the public and the policy analyst. So just with some of that in mind, wondering what your thoughts are. Anybody, don't know if we're ready to make any decisions, today on this, but figured we could start the conversation. As say, if not, we can revisit it. I guess as more information comes to me on, what Trevor's role is because I can see, as we talked about, that if Trevor, who is employed by the HHS, despite the fact that he is the policy analyst to the board, when he is making statements, those could be taken as being statements of the HHS. I think we honestly could take care of that with a nice legal disclaimer, to be quite honest with you. However, I want to see more people have more skin in the game with some of what's coming before us, right? It's one thing if it's something the board member brings in front of us, right? But I think it's another if it's a member of the public. And I think it might just be helpful to have, kind of assigned research projects and have. Happy to hear from you all as to what your thoughts are, and honestly, if you want the same, happy to hear this.
Well, I think as far as I'm concerned, I think multiple topics, I can't identify every single one of them, but I know Trevor and I speak usually multiple times leading up to different meetings, especially where pharmacology is involved, and understanding either the compounded mechanisms or the adverse effects. So I think we're already collaborating from a research standpoint in informing the policy statements that are brought here. So I think that's all of our responsibilities are to bring that added level of expertise as it applies to our fields to help turn around.
What do you think about who should be presenting that information? Because that seems to be a bit certain.
I think it's helpful to have a central person, but I think then that if he needs us to speak on something, we can usually arrange that in advance to know that we're going to follow on the statements, if that makes sense.
For sure. Do you ever feel like, you've seen something in the memo that you knew you had spoken to Trevor about, or you said I collaborated on, that it was misrepresented, it was overstated, it was understated, or anything like that? Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Right, I'll say a couple items. I think, Trevor's been instrumental in us understanding what other states are. I mean, Utah is at the forefront of the medical cannabis side. I mean, a lot of the laws and stuff we have are cited by other states that are limited with the medical cannabis side. We are heavily regulated. A lot of it is patient safety and public safety, which there needs to be, and I think his expertise is what allowed us to make a lot of the decisions and how we voted on things. And to Misty's point is having one voice to present, although that is nice at the end of the day, I think we're all in the seats we are because we represent some part of the industry or the public's interest or whatever we're at. And having us the ability to present on what we're passionate about, I know it'll make me like, because there's times that question, like, where's this memo coming from? And I have to ask Trevor, I know he wrote it, and then I find, oh, well, it came from someone else. So it's good to know that's where it's coming from, because then I get more context. Because then I know, okay, well, that's kind of, I can see why it's written in that direction. It doesn't seem like his normal writing that he's had, where it's been very neutral. And so I think that would kind of help stop and eliminate any sort of biases that we may potentially see. And because I fully expect if I'm presenting an item, I mean, I try not to have any biases on it, but I represent the industry as processors and cultivators. And if my goal is to protect not only patients, but also ensuring that the cultivators and processors have the ability to continue to make their products and provide high quality products as needed. And so it may be that way, and that may be something that, you know, we get down the road and I'm happy to present on. And I think, I mean, there's probably a balance between the two. What that is, I don't know what we want to look at or present, but I think I'd love to see us more involved in these discussions and when we're discussing and presenting, so that way we can hear from you directly.
Yeah, I do appreciate some of the research that you put out. Just kind of give a little context and background as to what's going to be discussed at our board meeting, and I'm certainly willing to set up to. You know, I mean, Trevor's reached out to me on my phone on several occasions on some information on some stuff, including one of the private agenda items today, to get some feedback, and I certainly appreciate that. But I like how it's been done today, even though I'm fairly new to the board. I'd like to see that continue, at least in some context.
Yeah, I think it's critical to have a central thing to consider, no matter how it's formulated, how we arrive at this. I think this is essential for us to have. But sure, I mean, if we can help more in any way, he knows he can call me anytime. We know him anytime.
Yeah, I think it's done, but I think, I guess it just comes down to, you know, what the perception is of him, right? Of perceiving him as presenting the position for HHS, I think should hold on. But perception is reality, you know, for many, and I don't want to put him in a position where he feels like it's, you know, his employer versus, you know, his service to us as a board, right? Because he does such a fabulous job. Like they told him to sit there, he's talking about the third person, he's sitting there. You know, but I think, look, I think it is essential that we have research groups. I just think it's essential. Now, how those are put together and who ultimately presents on it, and that's something I'd ask everyone to think about. But maybe one of the things we talk about is, you know, we all come from different areas, right? If it's something that's going to impact the pharmacy, well, then I'd be happy to work with Trevor to put a presentation together and work with the members of the public to bring something that impact the pharmacy. You know, really, I talked to Mindy before the meeting today to make sure she was going to be here. Done my own research on collaborative practice agreements here in Utah, you know what I mean? And so I'd be more than happy to do that. And I think if it's a cultivator processor issue and so on down the line, if it's a patient only issue. And then ultimately, if it's, hey, it would be better to be presented by the board member. So there is no question of who it's coming from. It's coming from you as the board member. I think that's fine. But I think it is vital that we have someone who can assist us with all of these things, because based upon the schedules and the lives of all of us, I think it's very, very different in-depth research as part of the rest of your day. I think part of it is, you know, the world I come from is the partner versus the associate, right? The partner assigned the associate to do all the legwork, and then when we get to the hearing, because the client usually wants the gray hair or the old attorney, that's the one who presents. And I'll be honest, I was just at a conference in front of a bunch of judges, and they said sometimes I wish they just let the associate present, you know, the argument. So there may be times where we don't have the ability to have, that preparation where the board member can present it to the public representatives in last meeting, right? That might be a short, few amount of time. But I think if we do have the time, I think it would make sense. And also too, if it's an issue you will for sure bring it forward, you probably should have some say in it. And then, so what do you think about when we need to do our prep meetings, right? So we'll need to get 2 days on Thursday, at 11, and, agendize the next issues, the agenda. How do you feel about us as that group, not, writing it in pen, but writing it in pencil to say, hey, this is who on the board we think would be good to collaborate with, and kind of lead out on this issue, and then Trevor can reach out to you and say, hey, this is what the board thinks. And then if you are like, what, I just am not going to be able to, or I think something else would be better, or have this came from a member of the public, what do you think about that? Is that we kind of just make, these temporary pencil assignments for people, and then of course you would have to agree. Des or Jimmy or Kent, who are online, do you guys have any opinions on any of this?
Yeah, I always have. I think that, looking at other boards, the board members do take a little bit more of an active role in like speaking from their spot of expertise. So, I'm all for that. I do love Trevor doing it because then that means that I don't have to. But yeah, I like the ease of Trevor doing it, but I do think that, us being more active, just I've been looking over that drug policy board that we made for the psilocybin, and they all took very active roles in research. So, I'm up for whatever.
I think Trevor also does an excellent job of bringing the context for what other medical cannabis programs are doing.
Right.
They're going to contrast with ours. So, and I think he's better able to do that than I know I am. So.
Yeah, I really don't like making PowerPoints, and Trevor seems to do good at those. So, I think that JD's right. Like, we need to be actively involved in this. So, and I'll be honest, Trevor hasn't called me in weeks. So everybody just, I'm getting a little FOMO over here as everybody talks about how he calls you, but whatever. But, so I think that let's at least have a people that we want to be involved in these presentations that he's doing.
And Jimmy, I don't know if you got any input here.
Sorry, you're a little mumbled, but were you asking me?
Yeah, either you or Kent, do you guys have any input on this further than
No. For me, I think what Trevor researches for me is extremely helpful. I'm not in the industry. I'm here on the public safety side. We actually don't tackle a lot of public safety stuff in these meetings, and so it's super helpful for me. And then I also like to for me, I'm big into consistency, and so it's helpful for me to see what other states are doing. So I just have resources, and so obviously, if there's a public safety issue, I'm glad to research it and give my opinion. But I think Trevor does a great job, and I appreciate the stuff that he puts together.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and echo what Jimmy commented from. I don't have a lot of expertise on some of these. I'm more on the general public representative, and some of my background's more on the economic development. And, when we're ready to talk about marketing, I'll get really excited about that piece. I haven't recognized or seen any bias also from Trevor's side. And so I felt very comfortable. I like seeing the opinion pieces from the different groups on these items. And so through all of these conversations, it's an education for me, and I felt comfortable what's being provided, but I'm always happy to hear from more individuals. So I think both Jimmy and I are echoing a lot of the comments we've heard.
Rich, you want to weigh in on anything?
I would just share that we know that there is a statutory requirement that we provide staff to the board, and we've done that. And Trevor's done a great job of doing research, and he'll continue to play that research role. And upon request of a board member researching a certain issue, that I think is something that makes his expertise unique in that he's got those connections to information from other states that is highly relevant to the decisions that the board makes. And sometimes there's not a lot of information out there. So at times it could be, actually, this is an issue where Utah is very unique and there's nothing from these other states. Right? So I think that's what he can continue to do. As far as presenting before the board, it's important that whoever's proposing the agenda item have skin in it and present the agenda item. And if they choose to reach out and get some information that may be helpful to them in the presentation, certainly they're able to reach out to Trevor and get some of that assistance about what things look like in other states. But I think it's important to maintain a separation where, hey, there's board members in industry that have items that they are proposing. And then we have support staff with our policy analysts and our administrative assistant that help with the research and administration of the board.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, we look at statutory text, right? Staff. It's pretty open. I think where, you know, I think the good place to start is maybe as we agendize the items for next month's meeting, we, you know, pencil in who we think on the order, you know, would be best suited to maybe head up, you know, that agenda item. If it's something that comes from a member of the public, you know, for instance, the collaborative practice that we discussed today, maybe that's something that's a board member in conjunction with your other members of the public. But I do still largely see us using Trevor to prepare the materials, probably just present them, but maybe not prepare all of the materials, right? You know, do some of the work that he's asked to do, but there's some. But for now, does that sound acceptable to everyone? This next time we set the agenda, we kind of softly pencil in who we think would be best suited.
Well, that may be Trevor in some instances.
That's what I'm saying, right? In
I
some
mean-
instances, it might not be something that has specific expertise. with
Correct.
them. It's just, hey, this is something that another state has done, you know, and we want them to go find out, you know, how they do it, you know, what other states are doing, right? It might just necessarily be a survey of law. So yeah, we may run into those issues, but certainly if it's something around, you know, research, we know we've talked to, right? So I think that the issues themselves probably lend themselves to the decision who's best to assign. Look, I think it's fine to present. To pharmacies and other ones too. If there's an issue that no one else wants to head up. Trevor and I can try and model our way through it together. I think that's good though. Like, it's why I've encouraged so many people that they bring things to my attention and say, well, you had, you know, did you comment at the board meeting? No, I didn't. Well, you sent me written sort of, you know, communication to the policy advisory board with the email address. Now I have, all right, well, I encourage you to do those things, right? If you want to heard, you know, but I also think too, this just takes a little bit of the onus off Trevor. And then look, I honestly do think if you are the one you asked to, you're the one who decided to, you asked me to present, I think we could very easily come up with some sort of disclaimer language that says that this is not the message or the position of DHHS or DAF or whatever, right? To just make it clear that this is what we asked you as a board to research, and this is the research that. And so there's no question. So if we're okay to handle it that way for now, you know, I think that's figured out as we kind of go. But our planning meeting will let you all know, you know, well in advance. And honestly, it's one of those things too, where you may say to us, you know what, that's a topic that's going to take me 60-90 days to fully research. All right, then that may help us agendize, you know, items, you know, better, because now that we come out of the legislative session, obviously short of emergencies like we had last meeting, we may have a long runway, you know, on some of these issues to flesh them out a little bit more. So your initial meeting, like for instance, today on the collaborative practice, it's likely to just be a discussion, right? Of you kind of trying to understand the issue, frame the issue. The next meeting is probably likely to present all the research and options as to what we can decide. And then maybe decide at that meeting, we can take action or vote, or it's the next meeting. We have a little bit longer runway. To Matt's point, that you made a bit earlier, we don't want to stagnate the board either, right? You know, I think we've made proud to hear from all legislative updates, some incredible progress, and several of the things that we recommend they made into bills, one of which has been signed into law, and anticipate will be signed into law, very, very shortly. We're going to have meaningful impacts on patients here in Utah. So I'm very proud of the work we've done. All right, anything from anybody else on this topic before we move on to updates from DHHS and UDOT? Okay. All right, well, I'll turn it over to Mr. O'Warren for any updates from the DHHS.
Thanks, JD. Just a few program statistics to share. So as of February 28th, 2024, there are 81,512 active medical cannabis card holders in the program. And when we say active, that just means they have a card. Doesn't mean that they're purchasing product, but and then there's 980 registered QMPs and 79 pharmacy medical providers or pharmacists that work at the medical cannabis pharmacies. And then if anybody is interested in getting more stats, those are updated monthly on our website. And just on the medicalcannabis.utah.gov under the resources tab, that's updated monthly. We wanted to make the board aware, and especially medical providers and pharmacists out there, that the University of Utah School of Medicine is hosting a webinar on harm reduction in cannabis. And that is a webinar that's happening on Tuesday, March 26th, 12 to 1 p.m. And the program that's hosting it within the University of Utah School of Medicine is the Program for Addiction Research, Clinical Care, Knowledge, and Advocacy, otherwise known as PARCA. They do a PARCA Parleys seminar throughout the year, and it's a seminar series. And their series theme is prevention and harm reduction. And so I can have Abby share that with the board via email, and it'll just be a Zoom link, and you don't need to pre-register. The virtual seminar is titled Harm Reduction in Cannabis Strategies for Safer Use. And the presentation will just highlight strategies to provide evidence-based harm reduction strategies to just share with patients and clients about minimizing potential harms from cannabis use, so they can make the most informed decision about their use and goals. And there's a lead psychiatrist, Kate Rain, MD, from the VA Puget Sounds Addiction Treatment Center. I believe she's also a professor at the University of Washington. She's the actual presenter. So, and also anyone in the industry that's interested, you can look up the University of Utah School of Medicine PARCA program, and the link is there as well. Also, we are on track to go live with the new EBS software in June 2024. The timeline is subject to change, but based on how things are going now, we believe that'll be the launch. And but there's just some things related to how the user acceptance testing goes and all of that. That'll be happening in the month of April, and we'll be involving people from the industry and QMPs and PMPs and testing the software to make sure it does everything it should.
Do you know if they plan to incorporate some of the new changes? For instance, you now are going to be able to have a campus to your workplace. Are they planning for that function to allow and for secondary veterans?
Yes, that's something that's relatively easy to reflect in there, and it'll be that particular change will be reflected in the launch. Yeah. And then also, just as by way of information, the next meeting of the Cannabis Research Review Board is Tuesday, not next Tuesday, but Tuesday, April 9th at 10 a.m. It's a virtual meeting. And if you're curious about the agenda, there will be one that's sent out soon, and you can take a look at what particular qualifying condition they're researching. And also Misty obviously is a member of that board, and if you have any questions, you could contact her as well. That's all.
Is Dr. Forsythe online, or is he not here? He's on. All right, Dr. Forsythe, please give us the data updates.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
All right. JD, did you want me to talk about the THCO acetate stuff here, or would you prefer to hold that till later?
Yeah, no, I think now is a good time, just in line with kind of, I said, I'm just kind of trying to understand, where we are, magnitude of the failure rate, that we're seeing from both your perspective as you have, as well as from APRC's perspective, the same time.
Yeah. So we've seen very little failure, I would say, with about 5% of the samples between both labs failing for THCO acetate content. That represents 14 out of a total of 287 samples. So overall, the majority of the products are being able to get through to patients, even with small amounts of THCO acetate. And we've been working with a few producers on studies to see how we can reduce the amount of THCO acetate in products. And some early results do seem a bit promising. I have some data I could share, but I don't seem to be able to share in this Zoom webinar. If I send the link to you, Abby, could you share it? Oh, okay. All right, let's see if this will work. Oh, says I can't share as a participant even, Abby. I couldn't quite hear you if you were talking to me, Abby.
Then just a minute, she's fixing it all.
Brandon, while she's fixing that for you, I did have a question. What are your thoughts around kind of allowing, products, these 14 of 287, the 14 failures to be retested, to just ensure accuracy of the results? Because obviously for these 14 products, that could be significant depending on who the producer is. Have you guys discussed that at all, or is that already in works?
Generally, unless there's reason to suspect that the testing is inaccurate, we don't conduct additional testing. There is going to be some variability in testing. That's a natural consequence of the analytical process. And so we really don't want to get into a point where we say we got one on one side of the line, one on the other, and now we got to start testing, taking additional samples and doing additional testing to see whether it can pass, getting into statistical significance. So we don't go there. So I would expect that we'd do the same here.
But you'll still be sending out, traditional failure notices. Right.
Yeah. And this is kind of a new process for us as well. So there might be some hiccups in that, but we do plan to have that carried out exactly the same as any other failure.
And the 14 of the 287, that is a combined number between your lab and APRC?
Yes, for only quality assurance samples. Not including any like R&D testing.
No R&D samples, okay. But this is for official testing.
Yep.
And do you know, Brandon, of the 14 that failed, how close were they to the 0.5? Or I guess if it was a finished product, granulation of 1%.
So we had one vape that was about 0.8 at our laboratory. And then at APRC, I believe their highest vape was 0.57, so about 0.7 or 0.6. And the others were closer to that line. We didn't have any concentrates fail at our laboratory, and I'm not sure that APRC did either, but I could be wrong on that. I don't have their full set of data here in front of me. but I do think it was all vapes that failed.
So it sounds like it's just right over that threshold, is that?
Yeah,
And Brandon, you can try resharing.
all right. Still saying disabled.
Brendan, you know the total number of units? I know it's 14, SKUs, but you know the total number of units that it failed testing?
I don't have the batch numbers for all of them in front of me. We could probably pull that data out of MJ Freeway with a little additional time, but it would be probably.
That would definitely be helpful, and when you get that, if you could just send it to Abby and have her send it to the board, just so we know the total number of units that it failed.
Yeah, and to be clear, we would allow remediation of these things if, it is a bit impractical to remove the oil from the vape carts, as I'm sure the processors here could attest to. But we would allow into it and for it to be incorporated into other products where we're not as concerned with the THCO acetate presence.
Yeah, that's one thing, that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you. So I noticed with the rule, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought our recommendation around the 0.5% was specifically for products to be inhaled. But the way the rule was written seemed like it was a blanket 5.5% across the board, or am I just wrong?
No, that is correct. It was really for simplicity in rule writing and for in like MJ Freeway or any other software that anyone's using for reporting and tracking. It gets really difficult the more rules you add on top of things in there. And so it's really for simplicity. All other products and vapes would have a dilution to be a much lower level. So if we ever had a gummy that managed to get up to 0.5% THCO acetate, we probably should be a little bit worried about how that's happening anyway.
On the remediation, front, is there a way that you would allow vapes kind of like full vape oil to be tested? You know what I mean, beforehand, before it actually made it into a vape cartridge,
Absolutely. You guys, the processors are always welcome to submit R&D samples to the laboratories before they do anything.
So they could mix in the terpenes and everything, and then send that off to you for essentially full R&D testing before they make the decision of what product to put in.
Yep, it wouldn't count as the regulatory testing, but it would be R&D.
Yeah, and are you seeing anything that suggests to you that those numbers would be different? Like that wouldn't be a good indicator of what the final potency would be?
I mean, we are seeing that heating does seem to be affecting the final outcome. And so if the processor is continuing to heat that material after it has been submitted to the laboratory, like in the little vape filling machine, those are usually heated. There's potential that it could increase a bit there. It's hard for us to say too much at this point, though.
Brandon, you can try sharing again.
All right, I'll give it another go. Oh, there we go. All right, can you guys see it now? All right, so in this top figure here, maybe I need to zoom in a bit for you. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay. So as you can see, as we would expect in biomass and the ethanol extract, and after removal of the ethanol, we really don't see any THCO acetate in there, no detectable amounts. But after decarb, it starts to show up, and then in the distillate heads and in the main, we start to see increasing amounts of that. And that correlates with what we kind of expected after talking with that group in Colorado, that this was coming in because of heat and starting in that decarb stage of the process. We're seeing that with the original distillation parameters, an oil that had 0.5% if a lower temperature was used, we are seeing a decrease in the total amount of THCO acetate that is produced. And in the decarboxylation, you'll see a pretty marked improvement, about a 3%. So with 3% lower temperature and 60% less time in decarb, we're seeing a significantly lower amount of THCO acetate produced. So I do think that there's a good path forward for processors in making a few changes to their processes. They should be able to make this a very small component of their total products. And I don't mean to trivialize what they need to do, because it does actually involve changing processes. So it's not necessarily just as easy as, you know, hey, just cook it a little less long. They're going to have to make some changes, and that takes a bit of time.
Do you see anything that's gonna require them to purchase more equipment? Or is this just using the same equipment just in a different way?
These were achieved using the same equipment as the processor was using before. I don't know that I could speak to all processes at this time, but I think that could generally be applied to all processors in the state.
What do you make of it showing up in solvents products? You guys looked into that at all yet?
Solventless are generally still decarboxylated, so it doesn't surprise me.
THCO acetate.
Sorry, somebody asked a question I can't hear.
No, you answered the question I had, so I appreciate it.
But still no answers on at what temperature THCO acetate has to be heated to convert it to ketene gas. And I'm guessing similarly, no answers as to, is there a certain level at which THCO, regardless of the conversion to ketene gas, what level of potency it's potentially dangerous to patients?
Yeah, there's really not going to be any updates to that until some clinical trials or clinical data, or even really any research data is put into practice. And I think that's going to really, we're going to have to spearhead that up at the University of Utah to get that to happen, because I don't know of anyone who's currently looking into it other than that one lab in Colorado, and they're not really focused on it as their main job.
I think the first question is more easily attained than the second, because I think the first would be answered in the laboratory. Second, require clinical phase studies.
Well, and I think, you look at the industry again, right? Vape cartridges themselves have a temperature set point. We understand at what temperature they're actually using and how high they can actually get. Where it's kind of out of the control is alternative methods for the inhalation, dabbing, things like that. That can be, you may not have as regulated heat controls, or it could be higher temperatures. So I think if there is a study, that's probably a huge importance. If we know it's not creating this gas, which is then to cause issues in lungs. That may change how we feel as a board and what that limit is, but we need to know. Obviously, I don't know if any patient's going to sign up to. I know you have machinery that there's need to be an extra diagnosis to finding what that effect is and it's allowable. The hard thing we're dealing with is these 14 failed ones being so close to that limit. I understand like the higher range ones and ones that are well above it. If Brandon, if they get that retested through the failed quality assurance process, and it's within. Is there any margin of error that would if your test comes in lower, would it be allowed to be sold back into the market?
We don't have a margin of error built into this, so that's why we usually just stick with the original test stands unless there's some error with the testing. it leads to too much back and forth and additional cost for the program.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't want to see it turn to a point where we just keep sending tests to each lab until we get the result we want. That's not how labs work.
But also, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of
Right,
dollars,
yes.
as an operator, but business, and I would hope there would be some understanding around why occupancy and requesting, retesting. One question, another question I did have for you, Brandon, is, and Rich, you might be able to chime in here too, as a public health, authority. Are any of you aware of any reported cases of lung injury as it relates to a medical cannabis product in Utah, specifically health product?
I don't know of any, no, in the Utah market, no. I have heard reports in Oklahoma though, well, a single report.
Do you know what level of THCO acetate was in that product that was reportedly cause of lung injury?
Unfortunately, no. They don't have a value to give me is the reason I don't. More looking won't help.
But we could reach out to whoever reported what was reported and ask a follow-up question for clarification. Sometimes.
The one in Oklahoma,
Yes.
it was never quantified as the problem.
Oh, okay.
They just did a detect, non-detect method, and so they detected THCO acetate and the person did end up in the ER. But they did not have a quantified, the ability to quantify, the lab at the time didn't.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I think looking at these numbers, obviously we knew 0.5 was an aggressive number to propose at the time. Obviously, percentage wise, 5%, and to kind of to JD's point, whoever this producer is, who has the majority, if it is one producer, I know several producers have had failed products. It is a huge financial impact. And I think what's hard is that for some of these producers, they are quite small, and this is a make it or break it product. I meif it doesn't pass, we're probably not gonna see the products again in Utah, unless something changes. And so, whereas this product's been in all the products until 3 weeks ago, when we began widespread testing for it, we haven't heard any impacts. I mean, do we want to entertain, is there, can we make I know we did it before for like the Delta 6, Delta 10. I mean, can we propose some kind of a rule amendment to transition to the more aggressive number? I mean, that way these processors, most of the stuff is oil that was made months ago. So any changes they're making today, we're not going to see for at least 30 to 60 to 90 days in material. Is that something as a board we want to propose? Is that something you'd be able to amend as your rule, Brendan?
I mean, we would have to file additional rule changes, so it's certainly not ideal.
But
And
it can't be done, correct?
sorry, what's that?
It can be done. I mean, it would be another emergency, essentially another emergency version of the rule, correct?
Yeah, I think we would have to show that there's justification for the emergency rule. We can't just submit emergency rules willy-nilly. We got to show that there's there's certain qualifications that have to be met in order to show that an emergency rule is necessary. And one of those was that there's a danger to the public, which I think was justified in the fact that patients would have been completely without medical cannabis if we hadn't filed that initial emergency rule, because we just wouldn't have any of those types of products, vapes or anything made from concentrate available in the market. But it gets to be a bit harder to justify an emergency rule change if we're saying it's to save some companies from going out of business.
So you don't see that as a reason you would justify a rule change is allowing operators who some feel like maybe the goalpost as we moved on a little bit, the chance to kind of get in line, because if what you're saying is true, and yes, it's gonna take some changes in processes, you know, to do this, it sounds like it's not necessarily gonna take new equipment, it's just gonna take some time and some thought and some change in process. Wouldn't that warrant, you know, keeping licensees, folks who have invested many millions of dollars in their business, paid the $100,000 licensing fee, the ability to kind of catch up and get in line? I haven't heard from one of the processors I've spoken to, and I doubt you have either, that anyone wants THCO acetate in their products. I mean, from the very beginning, as soon as we heard of this, I can tell you from our own company's perspective, it wasn't, how dare you? Why do you have a problem with THCO acetate? It was, we need to figure out how to get this out of the product. Same with Delta 6A10, right? We want to work towards that. And I feel like saying to people, hey, tough luck. It was good enough to protect patients, you know, and make sure they have a product. But now you as operators, those that service the patients, that doesn't, your ability to stay in business wouldn't warrant that rule. So I guess, you know, what I would ask is just, you know, a bit of an understanding there, because it's not just simple enough to say to someone, hey, you made some oil many months ago. You unintentionally created THCO acetate, and now you're essentially just SOL. And for some, that could be, you know, out of business, which only is going to negatively impact the patients. Yes, that negatively impacts the business. You also have a significant negative impact on patients. And where we don't have any reported negative effects from THCO acetate to this point, I feel like we should be a little more understanding and willing to amend the rule again to something that might be a little more, you know, a little more reasonable. Obviously, with the understanding we can always come back, just like we talked about last meeting, you know, and reduce it if necessary. I just think that I can't swear those two statements.
Well, to be clear, this isn't a Department of Agriculture rule. It's the Utah Rules Office that makes that rule. We have to have sufficient justification to file an emergency rule with the Rules Office.
All right, well, I guess, you know, we as either individual board members or members from the industry can look into, you know, what that justification needs to be, and obviously we can come back as a board and make that recommendation if need be, because it sounds like there's not consensus there, so it's unfortunate.
As a point of clarification, I was looking up to see if I could find anything on the Oklahoma incident. And it says in October 2021, the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, OMA, experienced an increase in reports, plural, of dangerous side effects in patients who use medical marijuana product. The reported adverse events, including difficulty speaking, vomiting, and seizures. Testing of one of the medical marijuana products, called platinum OG sugar, was performed and confirmed the presence of Delta 9 THCO acetate. As Delta 9 THCO acetate is not a medical marijuana product, the OMA recommended that medical marijuana users review the COA available at licensed medical marijuana dispensaries to review the quality and safety of the product ingredients.
Nothing about them almost setting any kind of limit on that, right? They just instructed the patients to do their diligence.
All the information is provided. That was from a poison control center in. That's all. I'll share that with you.
I've read it.
All right.
Just to highlight, looks like one hand just went down, but we did have two hands up. We're still on, you know, agency updates, but if you would like to recognize those two hands, you may.
Sure. So I honestly think the legislative updates should fully review progress to update. So I'd be happy to hear from either of the folks that have raised their hand.
And we've got Alex from Pure Utah first.
Yep.
So Alex, go ahead and let me just share.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, give us just a second, Alex. We're pulling up the timer.
Okay.
All right, you're good to go, Alex.
So yeah, this is Alex. I'm the GM at Pure UT Processing. So we had bulk oil tested, and then we filled that bulk oil into 3 separate vape products. It's the same oil, just filled, 300 units of this, 300 units of that, 300 units of this other vape. And we get the 3 COAs back, and the THCOA ranges from 0.45 to 0.57. So that one that Brandon was saying is the highest result that's our sample. So what I'm saying is 2 of the vape products from the same oil tested in a passing result and one failed. It's the same bulk oil, and the one that failed, it was actually under heat for less time because it was the first vaporizer that we filled with that bulk oil. So this theory that time under temperature is making it go up, I mean, the results that we're seeing don't show that. And it just leads to a bit of this like variance issue where just this small amount of variance causes 2 of my products to pass and 1 to fail and become unsellable. And as Brandon's saying, no need to retest. I find that troubling. And then just the fact that like this little bit of variance that's really hard to, I guess, quantify on their end is causing 1 to fail and 2 to pass. So 2 of those products are going to go to patients and 1 isn't on really an arbitrary number that was set in that last meeting. I mean, you guys all agreed that this number was arbitrary. There's no research showing what an unsafe or a safe amount of THCOA is. And to have a product like this get filled into 3 SKUs and have 1 fail, that right there is just kind of showing that this limit might not fit. And maybe, you know, until we figure out what safe and unsafe is, raising that limit to something where products aren't going to fail like this is something I think you should look into. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Next, we have Blake.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Blake.
This is Blake Smith from Zion Pharmaceuticals. I just wanted to point out that I think it's very strange to be arguing about the merits of having THC acetate. It's not, we don't know what the safe limits are, but we do know that it is a hazardous compound. Unlike the Delta 10 and Delta 6, any of the acetate forms have been shown to be unhealthy. So it's not like we're arguing about something that we don't know has health implications. We just don't know what the limits are, just like spider parts in your breakfast cereal. So the next thing I would say is, look, as somebody who provides medicine for patients, we all attested as processors that we could make clean material that would not endanger patients. That's period. And look, I have 72 employees. If I lose a batch, that's a significant deal. It makes us stressed out to figure out whether or not we're going to be able to make payroll, et cetera, et cetera. But regardless of that, my job is to make good, clean medicine. And I think, you know, we already put in rule to allow most people to pass. So until we get more data, to go in and change the rule willy-nilly again seems to be an overreaction, or it seems to be not a full representation of patients or other players in the industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Blake. All right, anyone else from the board have anything further they want to discuss? We don't have this set for any kind of action, so we just want an update. And Brandon, if you could, just pass along to us once you have that information of units, just trying to understand, you know, the impact, and really, and just trying to understand this thing so we can get it right. You know what I mean? But I understand that is at this point a pretty complex thing to so I think that's really all that this discussion really is trying to set to us. Get it as right as we can. Okay, with that, we will move on to the legislative session debrief. One of the bills, SB 233, has been signed into law, so it is you know, it's on the books, so to speak. It will become effective on May 1st. The other bill that passed, HB 389, which really the main gravity of that was, you know, related to both more pharmacies. It has not yet been signed into law, but it has 2 days to do so, but it also can pass into law, you know, without his signature, as long as he doesn't veto. So I don't see any reason why it would be vetoed. So I guess we can assume essentially the law and it becomes effective May 1st as well. So I really did want to just share with you kind of, where some of our recommendations went, or not as a board. So first of all, the recommendations we made around felony disqualifications, to be honest, those are already in the bill, but they did pass through. So now, a felony conviction is only disqualifying you from being an agent on any side of the cannabis industry, or from being an owner if it's less than 10 years old. I'm hopeful over time we can see that go down, and hopefully get rid of it at some point. But for now, it's it's only disqualifying for 10 years, which is good. Medical cannabis processor advertising and targeted marketing. If you'll remember, we did recommend to allow medical cannabis processors the same rights medical cannabis pharmacies to engage in advertising and targeted marketing, and prohibit processors from listing pricing discounts or incentives for medical cannabis products in targeted marketing. They did adopt that first one, around targeted marketing. I didn't see there was any expansion around advertising generally for businesses on the supply side, especially processors, but they will be allowed to engage in targeted marketing. But the way it was set forth in the bill was that it was going to be really fleshed out further in the rules. So I imagine that's where our second point around prohibiting processors from listing prices, discounts, incentives, those type of things may come in. And I imagine that rule will likely come in front of us. Cody or Brandon, do you guys, with the law going into effect on May 1st, do you have an idea as to when we might see a draft of that rule, or when we might come before the board for discussion?
So the laws indicate that we have about 180 days to come with the rule after a law change. Our priority right now, because the hemp bill went into effect upon the governor's signature last week, is dealing with those rules first and foremost. So once those are done, we'll start diving in deep on these other ones. We've got a couple of them that are started to be drafted, but to give you an exact date, I probably wouldn't be able to do that. But I would say at the very least 2 months from now, if not possibly, you might be able to get at least one draft of something next month. But
Awesome. Thanks for the update. So turning to number 3 on our list, medical cannabis dosage forms. As you'll remember, we did recommend to allow suppositories, as well as any homogeneous edible dosage form, including to chocolate chewables, as legal dosage forms. I can tell you suppositories were adopted without any amendment. They did make some changes on the second point, the homogeneous edibles, to allow for softer hard confections that are in uniform rectangular, cuboid, or uniform spherical shape and homogeneous color and texture. Unfortunately, the chocolate was specifically prohibited in the bill, but this will allow 2 new dosage forms, or at least an expanded dosage form and a completely new dosage form in Utah. So I think that's definitely something that's pushing the program forward. As to number 4, the medical cannabis pharmacy ownership cap. This is in HB 389. These ones that I've been reading to you previously have been in SB 233, so that has been signed into law. HB 389 has not yet been signed into law, but it did have in it a provision that establishes that 30% pharmacy ownership limit, whether for single entity, related entities, whatever. No group, I guess, for lack of a better term, can own more than 30% of the available pharmacy licenses in it. So legal dosage limit exceptions. This was something that I know that folks from Beehive, brought necessarily in front of the board, and we recommended in favor of it. I believe this was one thing that was already in the bill by the time we spoke about it. They didn't adopt some of the specific changes that we wanted around changing the word qualified medical provider to recommending medical provider or pharmacy medical provider. They didn't change and or when we were talking about kind of the hoops they would have to jump through to be able to kind of go above their limit stated law, but they did adopt a 28-day purchasing period limit waiver. So those patients who need to go beyond the state max are going to be able to do so. So I think another thing that's important, especially for those patients. Number 6, unfortunately, the business tax credits and decoupling bill, SB 72, it failed to pass. And this was really due to a lack of funding. I think initially, some of the pushback on it was, especially from Senator Kurt Brown, was, well, you guys knew what the game was when you got a medical cannabis license, so basically, it's up to, you know, like, you gotta pay your taxes. I think that position softened over time, and he was able to work it out with Senator Biggers, and they were able to move it through the Senate, and into the House, and it actually cleared out of the committee with a favorable recommendation. But, it was sent back to the Rules Committee to fund, you know, they couldn't find the funding, and it's unfortunate, you know, that would have been, you know, that would have, you know, saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I will say, you know, there are some, you know, potentially rescheduling is on the horizon. I say that with very bated breath, but I also know there are several of those in the industry that have been getting large tax returns from the IRS. You know, by filing amended returns, and certainly there may be some, you know, relief there. Those are far less. You know, this would really help on the state level, but you know, for whatever, you know, reason, they couldn't find the, you know, funding. Capping medical cannabis processor licenses, number 7, despite the fact that we recommended in favor of a soft cap, this was never even adopted into and didn't hear much discussion about it during the session. And then finally, telehealth renewals. I knew that we had a robust discussion around it, and we had made a recommendation for our grants. This was so overall, I think our recommendations were very well taken, and a number of very important changes were brought. So that's all for making significant change. So, we talked this past session. So. Okay, does anybody else have anything as it relates to the legislative session they want to talk about? Take that as you know. We'll move on to number 6 on the agenda. And again, you guys get to hear from me. Okay. So, yes. Okay, so we had, as a company, we had some questions around kind of final package testing for vapes and edibles, and so we reached out to Dr. Forsythe, and it was some email to communicate kind of just a proposal we had, you know, around that testing. Ultimately, you know, we understood from UDAP's position that, you know, final package testing for edibles needed to remain the same way it was, just because they're very different, kind of different than a vape cartridge. A vape cartridge was sealed and capped. There is not a chance for microbial contamination, obviously, hands to touch, you know, the products are so we understood that, but we did continue to pursue the idea of making changes around vape cartridge testing. So at least as it stands for us, I can let Matt speak to his situation. But the fact that it sounds like things are being happening differently for different licensees, or maybe depending on the lab where you're having it tested, we are being required to have all vape carts in final package form before we can send them off for testing. And so we were just really hoping to avoid having to have it in a final package and be able to send it in bulk, get the results back, and then final package it and be able to send it out. And you know, some of the reasoning, you know, that we provided, you know, it requires, you know, more labor and time up front in filling and packaging the cartridges, which obviously impacts scheduling and testing timelines, because as you know, testing, you know, can take, you know, for certain things it can be quick, some things can be slower. So just trying to provide some predictability around that. And as I talked about, once the card is filled and capped, there really is no risk around, you know, further contamination. And you know, really the bags and the tubes and the boxes don't necessarily, you know, relate to cartridge safety or quality. They're more related to obviously packaging and tamper-resistant, tamper-evident things, you know, of that nature. And the packaging is not going to, you know, is not going to be impacting microbial quality now under the test. So that's why we, you know, just, you know, we would like to see it, you know, just set forward specifically the rule to allow all people testing for, you know, for vape carts. And honestly, I think this is somewhat similar to, you know, biomass, you know, not requiring that whole biomass test and just allow final product testing. I think this is, you know, somewhat similar to, you know, to that, just allowing it to not have to go through so many tests or so many processes before it can be finally tested. And it's not going to impact, you know, patient health and safety. Then with that, happy to answer the questions, if not.
Cody, is this a Brandon question if I have?
Yep, that'd be a random
All right,
question.
good job. Brandon, you still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Is there, I mean, I can speak to process, like how we've been doing testing. But is there a standard on how things are being accepted? I mean, why? In talking with JD, the way that he's been doing vapes is completely different than how us as a processor have been handling the testing.
Yeah, we talked about this in a processor meeting a while back, several months ago, where we preferred to have them all in final packaging, but we hadn't put in place exactly that they had to be that way yet, because we were still making that determination and we're getting feedback from different parties. And so we hadn't really finalized a direction yet. We were planning to move towards the end of having everything in final packaging, because there was some concern about microbial contamination, but as we've learned since, all of the vape carts that we've seen have a little cap on them on the tip, which really takes away that concern with microbial contamination on the tip of the vape cart.
I mean,
Not
all
as-
kinds of media have a tip on the top and on the threaded side. If
Yeah.
it comes that direction. I mean, there's other alternatives to cartridges. I can't speak to the pod systems or other types on how they come through. But, I mean, they are in there. So, I mean, are you guys just looking for, I mean, I'm happy to give direction on this. I think to JD's point, there is quite a cost if you're gonna go in and package items, go through all that packaging. It's not just the labor, it's the storage. I can fit 100 vape cartridges in a 4-inch tall by 8-inch by 8-inch box. And it stores quite easily when it comes to inventory control. It's a lot easier for the state regulators when they come in for inspections to count my inventory, know where we're at any given time. Whereas when it is packaged in individual units, it's a little bit more difficult to keep all together. Especially if you're doing large scale numbers, not these smaller batches that they can't have at a time. But yeah, I mean, if we want to make, if there's a motion, I don't know, does anyone else on the board have any comments or any questions about this process? Okay, no idea what we're even talking about.
If I can raise one of the department's other concerns though, real quick. We are at least somewhat concerned with having them labeled appropriately. And I think a lot of processors, if not all of them, don't individually label each vape cart with the batch that they're a part of. And that does become a concern because you can pop one out of there pretty easily and suddenly it's anonymous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the current process we're utilizing is the box they're stored in is labeled. It's the same with the gummies. I mean, we store about 400 gummies in a large bin. They're packaged and sealed. Obviously, our packaging is specific to the type and dose. So I mean, you're not going to mix up a grapefruit flavored bag with one of our sour apple. You tell there's a difference. One's green, one is ruby red grapefruit colored. But again, we still do one label on the front of that bin because our labeling doesn't necessarily happen until an order is placed. Right now, when we have package splits, it's not like you go buy an item that has one SKU. No, our barcode is unique for every single order. So if a pharmacy orders 10 items, those 10 items get one SKU, and then maybe next week they'll order 20, it's a completely different barcode. It changes with every single split. This is kind of the process we deal with. And so, I mean, there was kind of working with the state on how do we manage that without having to continually relabel packages, because the worst thing to have is to have a patient is you go buy some gummies and you're seeing 2 or 3 labels over the back, and you're wondering, okay, what's wrong with this gummy? Why does it have so many? Try to peel it off, and you're not gonna be able to find what the original printing was. So there's quite a bit of concern with that on the patient side.
Brandon, would it alleviate y'all's concerns if, you know, whatever type of container was provided to the sampling agent in, or when the sampling agent came out, that they provided, you know, they put some sort of, you know, identifying sticker, whether that's something created from MJ, some sort of labeling, without having to essentially print a label for every single 510, because you might as well, just file a package, right? Is there something that we could do, at least for when we send it to you, to say, hey, these 500 cards are all from this, you know, are all the same SKU, here's the label and all of that stuff, would that be helpful, or is your concern more, once you get it to the lab, not knowing what's what?
Yeah, I think we want to make sure that everything is identifiable at every part of the process. And so I definitely think there are solutions. And one of those will have to be, like, one thing in particular will have to solve you just identified, which is that transport to the laboratory. We need to make sure that each vape cart is identifiable, because if one, you know, rolled out of a bag somewhere along the way because somebody didn't seal it properly, it could lead to some confusion and maybe accusations of theft or something like that. So it would be best just to keep, we can solve it, but we need to solve it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to stick a sticker on every single one. I mean, you're taking 8. It's not hard for me, instead of printing 1 sticker that I normally do, I can now print 9, put 8 of them on each of those cartridges and 1 on the main bag.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's an easy way to fix it without causing an undue burden to the industry, which again could affect patients, because, I mean, pre-labeling things, doing it that way, just there's no good way about it.
Yeah.
Especially the way the system is splits, and that's kind of how it is looking potentially designed going forward too. So.
Yeah, and we're amenable to work on solutions with the processors, so.
He wants a motion.
Of course, that's what I do, want to make a change, right?
Then we'll make a motion. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think we'll have to figure out, you know, some of the identification stuff, right, to make sure that everything remains consistent. But it sounds like if this is something that's kind of already allowed, and preference has maybe been the other way, and we can guard against, you know, whatever concerns you have, it sounds like a lot of the microbial concerns have already been resolved by the capping, and further caps that are put on them as well. So it really seems like it's an organization and correct identification. You all are committed to working on that with us as processors. I just think this is one less thing we have to do to be able to get products to market for patients. So with that, honestly, you know, I'm happy to make the motion, but if not, I see Matt typing on this. So, all right, I make a motion that we recommend to UDAF changing the rule or new statement in the rule that will allow vape cartridges to undergo final package testing in full, as opposed to in final package full.
I'll second the motion.
We'll motion in a second. Abby, will you take the roll call?
Do we need to caveat that involved, there will be?
I mean, we can, I guess, like, I don't think any processor is gonna. If you want to say that, we can clarify the motion to say that by whole, we need to be rapidly identifiable, organized in such a way that. But that's.
We all have to store them that way anyways right now.
Yeah.
I think the process is, I think if we have anything, it might be just that's a state sample technician requirement that the products be individually labeled themselves, not just, because typically the way it works now, they'll come get the products. We usually print 1 sticker that has all the applicable information on it, and they put it on the front of their Mylar bag, then it's sealed with the tamper evidence there. Now, the products are small, big parts are a little smaller than a large gummy bag, so they could potentially fall out. I can understand that point. So I don't know if that's necessary. Is that a rule change that we need to make, or is that a process change?
I was gonna say, that sounds like a process change.
It's a bad thing. Yeah. Brandon, what do you think on that?
I apologize, I couldn't hear the discussion very well.
What I'm asking is if, should we recommend in our rule to allow bulk testing of vape of products before their final package? That when it's picked up for sampling, it's requiring individual labeling? Or is that just a process for the sample technician? Like, is that just their SOP?
I think that we can take care of that in the sample technician, because you're not gonna label each single individual one. After they pick out the ones they want to take for testing, we can have you guys throw the label on those ones that they're gonna take. So I think we can take care of that as a process.
Okay. Okay, I think that'll be your motions. Yeah.
So I have this motion, recommend to UDAP a change in the rule that will allow baby cartridges to undergo final testing in bulk as opposed to in final packaging.
A second.
Ken Anderson,
Yes.
Nanette Beresney, Candy Clark,
Yes.
Desiree Hennessy,
Yes.
Jimmy Higgs,
Yes.
JD Lauritsen,
Yes.
Chris Morgan,
Yes.
Matthew Page,
Yes.
and Misty Smith.
Yes.
Right, that motion passes unanimously. And Brandon, just for clarification, my guess is, as you're able to, you'll prepare the language on that and then maybe bring it back in front of us, or at least provide us with the copy so we can see it before it goes to, publishing.
Yes, but please do have the board secretary send a note to UDAF as a recommendation.
And I honestly think that that's probably the point to make, right, is when we're making recommendations around rule changes and stuff. I know with the legislature, we were sending them, it might not be a bad idea if we, to just do that, right? I know they do attend these, but, with as busy as they are, it might just be easy for us to send. Now, if we're not having to send them legislative recommendations right now, might be a good idea to just do that as we can get rid of it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we are way ahead of schedule, 16 minutes, more than 5. All right, item number 7 on the agenda is card renewals, via a pharmacist. So I do want to here shortly invite Mindy up. This will kind of be, I guess, a test run of having a member of the public present on the agenda item. So we'll see how well that works. But I can tell you, this is something that I've discussed with Mindy and also John, over many months. It's actually something that was floated before last legislative session at conversations with Senator Vickers. And really where it comes out of is Utah has, like many other states have, they have a practice act that applies both to physicians, but also between physicians and pharmacists. And what it kind of allows a physician to delegate to a pharmacist when it comes to drug therapies and things like that. And so, there is a statute as well as a regulatory rule on this that kind of sets forth, the ground rules, really the parameters within. But I think, I may speak more of this, but where this comes from is I think that for the PMPs, not always, but in a large number of cases have a better kind of personal relationship with patients, and maybe in some ways better suited, of course, under platform practice guidance and collaboration with the QMP to do these rules. And there's also likely to be a cost benefit to patients as well, where they're not likely to be charged as much for a renewal, or most likely not at all, because they just feel like the cost that we have with a pharmacist. But it would still have to be done through a very specific agreement that spells out, what is happening. And I do know, that at least one, QMP does have these agreements already with pharmacists, including our own. They work very, very well. And it spells out things exactly as they're to be followed, right? It's reviewed on a basis. It allows PMPs to really make changes to patients' dosing in real time as opposed to having to wait to get in touch with, we had a community recently, who, had said for all of our patients, no pay. But then when we got in touch with the QMP, they're like, oh yeah, no, for this patient, yeah, we haven't changed it. But then, but then to get in touch with that QMP has been very, very difficult, right? But then patient's card expires and they go with that same QMP, and the QMP either doesn't uncheck the box in EDS or whatever, so that no vaping box stays checked. You have to call back, right? And so it's just, I think, another way to help with patient attrition. We've seen make it easier on our patients to review and allow them to really review through the medical provider that they have a previous relationship. So if anybody else on the board wants to speak to it before we've had Misty or Mindy to have her, I'd love to hear from you all. I'd love to give you a chance to kind of just talk about these from her perspective. Of course, love to hear from Chris as well, as a QMP and someone who would be, on one end, but practice experience.
I'd say, go ahead and Mindy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Mindy with BA Pharmacy, and I wanted to split this up into different sections. First, I want to talk about the concerns with the program now and the QMPs, and then the second thing I want to talk about is why PMPs are qualified to these collaborative practice agreements, and then I want to kind of go over a possible framework of how I envision this could happen. And again, this is going to be completely dependent on the collaboration agreement with the providers. So, biggest concern with QMP renewals is the cost. Currently, the price is about $150 to $300 per year. Beginning of the program, people are charging as much as $500 per year for a 3-month renewal, then a 6-month, and so it has gone down, but the cost is excessive. And I do know that patients are leaving the program to go purchase their products out of state, to buy in the legacy market, and to even purchase products that are sold at mall kiosks and in QMP offices and head shops. So this would be a huge win for patients to decrease that cost. The second concern I have with QMP offices is the recreational disposition in some of them. Again, it's not every single QMP office, but pharmacies are very regulated in what we can present, what can be appealing to children. But we do have some of the larger offices that only do cannabis cards that will sell THC 10 milligram gummies. And just for your reference, a 10 milligram THC gummy is 4 times the starting dose that I would recommend somebody use. So there are offices that are selling these products to their patients where they're not going onto the controlled substance database. They also sell things like Amanita muscaria mushroom gummies. They sell untested CBD vape carts, and they sell kratom, which to me, if you ever visit some of these offices, it just seems a lot more recreational compared to our pharmacies. And I want to keep this program as medical as possible. Okay, the second thing I want to talk about is why pharmacists are qualified. Every pharmacist has 6+ years of graduate level education. Almost all of us have a doctorate degree in pharmacy. We're professionals. We answer to a licensing board, just like physicians and nurses. We take a Hippocratic oath, just like physicians, to do no harm. We do the same amount of continuing education. And as we've all noticed, pharmacists are the experts in cannabis dosing. It is very, very rare for a QMP to give me specific dosing guidelines or to follow their patients or to view their past purchase history. I have seen renewals that my patients have conducted with QMPs in the pharmacy that are like 2 minutes long on the phone. There's no, they hardly even ask how things are going. The other thing that JD mentioned is a pharmacist has a really good relationship with a patient. We're available any single time the pharmacy is open and for free to answer questions. We're able to follow usage a lot closer. And I think patients feel more comfortable talking to us about their concerns and questions. And they also feel very comfortable giving us specific information that they wouldn't feel like they could tell a doctor. There is a precedence in Utah where pharmacists do collaborative practice agreements. Things like vaccines are probably our most common ones, where vaccines are prescriptions. Pharmacists are allowed to both kind of prescribe under a doctor's collaborative practice agreement and administer. There's even agreements in Utah where a pharmacist can prescribe medications that are prescriptions. The one that I'm thinking of is oral contraceptives. And even in this situation, a pharmacist doesn't even need a collaborative practice agreement. Oral contraceptives do have a risk of DVTs, which are life-threatening, and we have to watch out for uncontrolled high blood pressure, which is similar to cannabis. But there are things in place that do that. So, and like JD mentioned, the Department of Health has already approved a collaborative practice agreement in April of 2022 with Utah Therapeutics, where we were allowed to adjust the dosing of everything. So we were allowed as pharmacists to go through under a specific protocol that a clinic set up where I could increase the dosing limits without contacting the office. And you know, when we're talking about cannabis, we often say cannabis is a controlled substance. And I agree that we should consider it a controlled substance, but there's no other controlled substance so available to Utahns. You can go to any mall kiosk and you can buy a 10 milligram THC gummy, which like I said, 4 times the recommended starting dose. So I want to kind of move our program away from that and move it more toward the pharmacies where we're keeping track of everything. Utah is very unique and that we allow pharmacist involvement so thoroughly. There are a number of states that do require pharmacists to be on site to consult with, but we are one of the few states that require a pharmacist be available all operating hours, just like a traditional pharmacy. Very, very unique. And I think it's a wonderful decision you guys made. And I think if we can utilize the expertise of pharmacists a lot more, our patients will really benefit. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about possible framework. And again, this is just an idea. It would depend entirely on the collaborative practice agreement we set with the provider. In my mind, once a year, the patient would visit the pharmacist. So the first thing the pharmacist would do is to verify the diagnosis code with their primary healthcare provider or any provider that they have been seeing regularly. Pharmacists do this all the time in traditional pharmacies when they are dealing with insurance companies. So it's just a simple phone call. Pharmacists would call the provider's office, ask for the diagnosis code for patients. We document who told them that information. And as long as that diagnosis code is a qualifying condition, then they would be available to get a renewal. And the next thing I think is important is that the patient should be seen.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Would that include potentially contacting the QMP? What are we talking about?
I think it could be a QMP, and I don't think we'll ever get rid of QMPs because a lot of people don't have primary care physicians. But I just think you just contact somebody who is, there probably needs to be like a physical, and there needs to be somebody who's diagnosing the conditions. Pharmacists are experts in medications, but we are not experts in diagnosis. So we do need that from a healthcare provider. The next thing is, I think it's important, like I said, to have a physical. With the oral contraceptives, they require that there is a physical within 2 years. So it's important. So maybe as part of that collaborative practice agreement, you would also check to make sure the patient has had a physical within the last 2 years. And then the third thing I would do is collect a med list, and we collect a med list exactly how the QMP office collects a med list. And that's simply asking the patient. We pharmacists have been taught how to collect all that data. We spend 6 years at school learning that. Next thing I would probably recommend that be on a collaborative practice agreement is screening for contraindications. And this would probably be exactly how QMP offices do it too, is a form that the patient fills out that asks questions about pregnancy, questions to screen for cannabis use disorder, history of psychosis, uncontrolled blood pressure. And then the next thing I'd probably recommend is that the pharmacist check the controlled substance database. Again, this is something pharmacists do all the time in practice. We have access as well as QMPs to check the controlled substance database to make sure they're not on too many sedatives, to make sure if they're a pain patient, they are decreasing their dose as they've added the cannabis. And then the last thing is the pharmacist can then go over all the risks. They could help the patient dose properly. I just think the patients would benefit from having that pharmacist there that knows more about the medicine, knows more about the patient, knows more about their purchase history. And it would really free up the QMPs to do the diagnosing of the conditions and allow us to take over the software, all the paperwork, the foods. And I can't speak for every single pharmacy, but I just know that Beehive, actually JD mentioned the Wholesome probably would also offer the service for free or at a very, very low cost. And the reason that we would do that is because it would help the program. More people are going to stay in the program, less people are going to go shop out of state, less people are going to buy in the legacy market. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody, probably except for QMP offices. So, and I want to be respectful of that. Like, I think the QMPs are great, but it's just something that I think could be run a little bit better. So do you guys have any questions?
I
No,
don't,
Go ahead, Jessica.
Mindy, I don't have any real questions. One, I have one suggestion, or I guess I just want to know what you think about this, because I've
Yeah.
heard about, we've thought about this plan before. My long-term goal is to have this medication looked at a regular visit with anybody's regular doctor, right? So
Yeah.
anytime you go to the doctor, this medication is talked about. I love your plan. Oh, and I know, I'm sorry. I love this plan. I understand it's not yours. I know this has been a collaboration of a lot of people looking out for what's best for patients in this program. I would like to see, hey, hold on, honey. Sorry, my kid is doing her homework right next to me. Something that kind of brings the primary care physician back into this. And I know, like, if they're seeing a QMP, you'll be working the collaborative practice with them. I understand some doctors aren't going to be willing to be involved in this. But I would just like to see some kind of buy-in from the medical community. And I know we don't have an answer to that right now, but just some way to involve them. There's really no reason why doctors aren't getting involved. And the reasons one I've asked is they just don't want to take the QMP course, or they don't want to manage the EVS. A lot of it's just fear-based. They don't want to learn another medication that's very hard to learn about when everything's still federally illegal, right? And there's just a lot of unknowns. So just something maybe when we're doing this to just, let's keep in mind that the long-term goal needs to be is to normalize this into a regular visit. So
And I think, go ahead.
I just don't, because the pharmacists have become such a special, the specialists in this market. I think that it makes complete sense to slide this over to you guys for now. And really, I think long term, this will be fine. I just would really like to see doctors involved in us communicating more with them. I do think, we will never, QMPs will always be necessary. Like you said, a lot of people don't have doctors and vets, right? When they go to the VA, they have to see a QMP for this because they cannot go to their VA doctor for now. But I think that one thing that that's worth bringing up is just that when we drop this cost, like if we can get these to an affordable cost, $20, $30, the cost of a copay, whatever, it's not going to be the concerns that I've heard is that it would be more recreational because you have like this one-stop shop, right? The pharmacist is there and they're going to be the ones recommending medication from their own store. And that's the only argument that I've heard. But the truth is that because you guys have become the specialists, because the costs will be low, I think this will be the preferred method, but also like, I haven't walked into one pharmacy one time when there was, when it was recreational, right? Like, and I have never had a patient go to a pharmacy and them only recommended product from their pharmacy. They're always very good about like recommending the right product for the right condition. And I know I'm getting off topic, but truly, and I'm not saying all QMPs because we have some really good QMPs, but in going to QMP offices and talking to QMPs or patients that see QMPs, our risk of recreational program comes more from a lot of these QMPs than it does from the pharmacies. And we have some really, really good QMPs, but we have some that are just about as borderline recreational as they can get. So I think that, I think that handing this to pharmacies in this way, or if, we change a couple things right now, I think it looks good as it is, but I honestly think that this is something that just needs to happen. So thank you.
Yeah, and I thought first, like when I was talking about how I envision the renewals, I think verifying the diagnosis with your primary care provider is key. Because then you're having this healthcare team where the primary care provider knows that the person's on cannabis. To me, it's like, that's the way to make it easier for these physicians to be involved in our program and just know that the pharmacist is the expert. They're taking, they're the one whose license is on the line. They're the ones who are putting that on their shoulders. All the primary care provider is doing is saying, yes, my patient has chronic pain. And then so to me, and I like the LMP program. I loved the idea, but the execution, it was too complicated. It did not work. And in my head, if we could have had an LMP program where a doctor just simply wrote on a prescription pad, okay, for cannabis, and then the pharmacist did all the labor, you would have a way more successful LMP program.
I tell you, though, how do you propose dealing with primary care providers who aren't QMPs? Are you making an assumption you can just call the office and they're going to give you a diagnosis code as soon as you drop the medical cannabis jargon?
Hopefully, yeah.
They will not. I, as a QMP and a primary care provider, I sometimes have to fight for medical information.
Well, the patient could also bring in records too.
Yeah,
I
tried that myself. And sometimes I have to wait up to 2 or 3 weeks to actually get the records that I need to make sure they have a valid qualifying condition. I think what you proposed is has some good aspects to it, but I think there are some potential pitfalls that could really lengthen the process of a renewal and you trying to get some of the information that you're looking for. And personally, I do take exception to some of the comments about pharmacists knowing the patients better than their primary care providers. I disagree. I know my patients a lot better than pharmacists. They go get their medications to.
Yeah, I'm sure there's exceptions.
Yeah, so, and on the other hand, the other issues that I see here is, yes, in one sense that it might reduce cost for patients. But I guarantee you, the QMPs, you're gonna, if you go this route, there's QMPs you're gonna lose out of the system because that's revenue for them. They'll drop. There's some QMPs that will move that lost renewal revenue and increase their initial intake costs. So that cost will go up. I just don't think that this is quite the answer. I think there's going to be more consequences in terms of your QMP pools than there are by allowing something like this to move.
Yeah, I recognize it will affect QMPs, businesses and offices. I think it could really help patients, but I am cognizant of the fact that it's drastic in that arena. And I'm hoping for a hybrid model where we still have some QMP offices and we still
Yeah,
have
I think we could look at, I'm willing to work with pharmacists on some type of collaborative practice model for this. I just know up in my neck of the woods, there are some rogue pharmacists up there that play primary care quite a bit. And I have to come back and fix some issues with patients coming back to my office that's inappropriately on thyroid medications because they had a spit test that said their TSH was too high.
There's also a do a collaborative practice agreement for you to set.
Guardrails.
Pharmacists can't do.
Right.
You couldn't set on a general pharmacist. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the concept of it, is to somewhat constrain what the pharmacist can and can't do, under your direction. And I think the issue here is much more the idea of what is this going to mean for the financial impact to QMBs, where some of them make a majority of their revenue off of,
Right.
renewals.
But I agree though, some of the pricing is ridiculous. $500 in a year.
Yeah,
It is ridiculous. My prices aren't the cheapest. They're definitely not $500 a year.
yeah.
But they do compensate me and my staff for our time. It's in line with what we bill, insurance and stuff, so it's not outrageous. And it's not, but we also take on quite a bit of risk with this. Our malpractice premiums are higher as a QMP than a non-QMP. Sometimes it's very difficult to find.
Yeah, and I think a
malpractice
pharmacist really need that.
carriers that's actually admitted to Utah for insurance products. So, I think this is something that needs to be explored further. I don't think it's something that we should try to buckle down and nail in the next 30 to 60 days or whatever. But I think a hybrid model might be more appropriate where the QMPs are involved in those renewals and allowing the pharmacist to renew as long as there's some type of input from the QMP. Especially, for my patients, I would want to see them. I see them quite regularly.
Do you allow telehealth renewals? Like, or do you see
It
them
depends on when I last saw them
Okay.
and their current medical status. I have some patients that are quite have a lot of medical issues that are on medical cannabis, and I see them on a regular basis. Those that have issues with blood pressure and stuff, I need some of that data, and it
Yeah.
can come from them coming into my office.
I wish all QMPs were like you, honestly,
So-
like that's a really good way to.
But there are some business models that I feel like are have some unethical ways of doing this, and it's more for the bottom dollar.
Yeah.
And making money than it is more for the patients. I don't think anybody can dispute that. How we can fix the system to improve it so they get good quality care both from the QMPs and the pharmacies and provide the services at a reasonable cost. I think that's all of the goal here. How we can do that, I don't know. This may be one of the answers, but I don't think I don't think for right now, for me, it feels like it's trying to get the QMPs out of the equation on the renewals. Or at least substantially lessening their involvement with renewals.
I would love to shift downplay the QMP involvement and upplay the PMP, the primary care
Right.
provider involvement. Like, I think that's the best way to practice.
But it is going to be difficult to get some of that information from primary care physicians. As soon as they hear medical cannabis, they won't talk to you. They won't give you any information. You have to send back some specific. You got to send a request for information, and it could take up to a month to get that back. So
As a pharmacist, when I'm working in a traditional pharmacy and I need a diagnosis code, sometimes insurance companies will require specific diagnosis.
right,
code.
and I
I
put
just
them on
call
my
the office
prescriptions
and
and my
say, "Can I
e-scripts
get a
and stuff.
diagnosis
I
code?"
put those diagnosis codes on my e-prescriptions and all.
Yeah,
And if
it's
that's.
usually pretty easy for us in a pharmacy. Like, I don't say what specific medication I'm calling for.
Right.
As long as you identify yourself as a pharmacist, it's usually pretty easy information that a medical assistant just pulls up. But I'm sure there's going to be issues.
Yeah, it won't be easy all the time, but
Yeah. And in that
by and large,
situation, you could refer to.
when you talked about medical cannabis, when I'm calling patients, primary care providers. I do a lot of specialty care, and so I do get a lot of referrals from primary care offices to my office for other things. But when it comes to medical cannabis, as soon as I drop that word, everybody shuts down. Oh, I can't say everybody, but a good majority of the other offices will shut down. The nurses won't. They say, okay, send us a request for information. We're not going to get that to you. So I'm like, okay, fine. So sometimes I'm just asking, does this patient have a valid diagnosis of PTSD? And the therapy office is like, if this is for medical cannabis, we can't give you that information right now. You have to send it.
And I was talking to some other pharmacists in the industry, and a lot of them expressed the concern that they probably would not feel comfortable renewing a card for PTSD. They would probably, there's certain situations, I mean, if anything is difficult or suspicious, they would definitely just be like, I'm gonna have to refer you to a QMP. It's just for these easy patients that have you been using cannabis for 20 years and they are doing well and they're using appropriate doses. That I think this makes sense for.
For me, I'm open to exploring a hybrid situation. I just worry in the current format that we might lose QMPs to a shift like this right now. And those who do end up staying, they'll just increase their license to actually start medical for additional.
I would love to, like, we could almost do some, I mean, if we're worried about QMPs being lost, I think a potential lifting up of the caps. There's certain things I think we can do that would make more sense to make our program more medical. I unfortunately think the caps have made us more recreational by creating these clinics that only specialize in cannabis. And most patients don't know who their QMP is. And that's why we ask the state to print the QMP's information on the card. So they don't have a good relationship. They're constantly changing because of the caps. So I just think doing that.
QMP, if that's all they do, they don't do anything else in medicine other than just do medical cannabis cards all day. That I think that right there poses a risk to some patients. Because I think a lot of those QMPs don't get all the information. They don't have an established medical or provide a patient relationship with that patient. I think there needs to be a relationship other than just a medical cannabis part of relationship with some patients.
Yeah.
And when it comes to QMPs, I know that the way it's written right now, it's going to be might be impossible to change that.
And just so you guys know what it would be like when a person sees a pharmacist, it's usually a 30-minute face-to-face consultation. I believe a patient should have that every year. And I think they could do the renewals, they could talk about ways to help their usage. And I know it's just too expensive for QMPs to offer that at a reasonable price where patients can afford it.
I'm open up to more discussions.
Well, I think the thing is to keep in mind, this would be under a collaborative practice agreement, so whatever parameters you felt comfortable setting, you could set those in a contract. If another provider felt differently than you in their professional judgment and they wanted to set different parameters, they could as well. I think that's one of the things, is this allows this to be malleable, right? It allows different providers to make different decisions, regarding it. And Utah's collaborative practice agreement is pretty open-ended in that regard, right? You know what I mean? And so that could be the gift and the curse of it, right? But I think, where we probably should start is, obviously we're not going to take any action today. This was meant for purely just a discussion. We're not ready. I don't think we have any certain parameters laid out. But I think what we'll probably do is probably agendize it for even as early as next month, and ask Trevor to work with Mindy and potentially myself as the pharmacy representative, and even give us a QMP representative, see what these might look like, right? And see what the law does say around it, to see what these agreements could look like. Obviously, we know this may be uncharted territory, across the country, but this is something that multiple states in general. And I think I looked at an article that said, even as a few years ago, there were 30 some states maybe that had some form of a collaborative practice, agreement that allows these types of things to happen. So this is not uncommon, in medicine in general. I think a lot of it is just trying to fight against patient attrition, right? Obviously, changing the renewals from 6 months to a year, we've already seen in data that there's been improvement, right? You know what I mean? We're not losing as many patients, and this is just another kind of way to kind of put a plug in the Swiss cheese a little bit, to keep patients from falling out. Is, to Rich's point, it really should be that, either they have medical cannabis truly isn't for them, and it's not helping to heal, whatever ailment they have, or they get to a place where it's helping them overcome, the ailment. It shouldn't be, I can't, my QMP wants to charge me $200 and I have to go see him in person, and therefore, well, now medical cannabis isn't for me, right? And I mean, I think that's the concern. So what I'd like to see is, we can talk about it when we have our strategy session on Thursday, but just setting probably Trevor off to do some research to find out what Utah's law actually says around all of this, and then layer on medical cannabis to see if it's something that could work. But I think the fact that the collaborative practice agreements, and I can tell you the one that we currently have, it doesn't leave any room for guesswork, right? The QMP is very much saying, in order to be able to change the patient's limits at all, here's all the boxes that need to be checked. And if it's this type of patient, you can only go to this level. If it's this type of patient, I might let you go to state max, right? So I think you can make them as restrictive as possible. And that's what I think the beauty of this whole thing is. We already have a law which essentially allows it, right? Between a physician and a pharmacist. So I do think it definitely warrants, much more discussion before we come to a decision. So the way I'm kind of thinking of it is, next meeting, we would provide kind of the research behind it, maybe start to work through the framework, and then maybe the meeting after that, or even a future meeting from then. Because this might be a legislative change, right? To sure specifically, recognize that this can be done. But also I think that would be part of the research that Trevor does, is this actually already allowed, based upon the collaborative practice agreement as it exists today, and then see what other states do, and not necessarily from just a medical cannabis perspective, but to see if there's any insight generally around collaborative practice law, in America. Because clearly a majority of states have decided this is a good idea, but cannabis may warrant some difference because it's not a primary care physician and whatever. But I do think it warrants further explanation.
And I wanted to add about the discussion you had in the very beginning, that Trevor is an exceptional communicator. And he has reached out not only to me, but to a pharmacist from every single pharmacy before. And we as pharmacists kind of feel like our expertise is not utilized, as evidenced by there not even being a position for a pharmacist on this board. So we feel like it's very important I think Trevor's doing a great job. And I feel like we're being heard more than we've ever been heard before. And I hope he continues to do the presentations, and because he does a good job of talking to different people in the industry and really listening to them. So thank you.
In the ongoing discussion, I would like to ask that mental health conditions receive some specific attention, because I do think they're a little bit different with regard to continued care and diagnostics and things like that. So I do feel like they need to be looked at on a little bit different field. So in those conversations, if that could be considered.
And I think you could create a collab. I agree that if they have any neurobehavioral issues, that you need to treat them differently. And as a pharmacist, that's one of my screening questions. In every first consultation, I ask them what neurobehavioral issues they have, like depression, anxiety, bipolar. And I think you could create a collaborative practice agreement that screens for those things, or looking at the med list, and then that could exclude you from allowing pharmacists to do renewals. Like maybe that they need to go to their QMP for that situation. So I agree with you.
I just think it's a great idea. I can think of 3 people that it would affect off the bat, like right away, how it would help them. I have a friend who is a teacher, and they have to take a full day off work to go see their QMP. So you could see a pharmacist
At 9 o'clock, at 8 o'clock at night.
Exactly. And I mean, are we really insured QMPs? I believe the practice would probably eliminate predatory behavior if you have it somewhere that's workable. Some of those people already only go to the block because they're teachers. They can only afford to go to the block because they give them a discount. So anything we could do to help patients, I'd love to see it done. Especially with availability.
Yeah, that's the biggest win. To me, that's the thing that would just change. It would be such a drastic improvement for patients in this program.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. I think what we'll probably do is we probably will re-agendize it for next month, obviously, depending on the research that Trevor conducts. I think that we will involve, Chris, maybe probably myself, other pharmacists is needed to kind of take the lead on this, collaborate on the presentation for next month. But I think a lot of it is just understanding what the collaborative practice act in Utah allows for, specifically long-term physicians and pharmacists, what agreements could look like, and those types of things. And then thinking about some of these, some of the concerns we've been raising, around mental health conditions, whether it's around, some of the other things that Dr. Morgan talked about. But yeah, I think this is a good discussion to have. And again, will be another area of the Utah's medical cannabis program, the innovation on this one. So yeah, definitely appreciate the conversation. So we don't really have anything agendized yet for next meeting. Obviously, this will be one of the items now. We do have a list that we can choose from. I think we've added some, some items. But I encourage all of you, as I do every single week, if there is something that you would like the board to discuss, please send an email to Trevor and Abby, to myself, and someone, because we're happy to address those, those issues. And now is the time, for someone like Jimmy, right? Jimmy says we don't deal with a lot of, public safety stuff around here. If there's something that's relevant to us, absolutely. You know what I mean? Bring those things forward. If there's something, I know Ken's no longer on, if there's something from the public perspective that you're concerned about. We, like I said, we don't want to just address, the lawmakers want us to address what, DHHS or UDOT wants us to address, we can bring forward issues too, because very specifically, we have the ability to make recommendations to local regulators, policymakers on anything related to that. So if you have anything, we will be meeting, I think, Thursday at 11. But we do have some things on the agenda. At least we will have this one item for discussion. And honestly, now that we're outside of the legislative session, short of emergency things like we had to in our last meeting, I think giving a longer runway to things is good, right? So we're willing to do that. But also with that said, we do have to move, move along through issues, because otherwise they're going to pile up. And the last thing I want us to do is stagnate and be seen as an indecisive, board, because I think we've made some great inroads. I'll tell you, I'm very proud of where we've come in less than a year. I think we've made some good decisions. Now, have we gotten every single thing right? I think we're not. I think there are people here committed to do the right thing. That's a big thing. So unless anyone has anything else, we can probably end an hour early. All right, well, with that, I will take the most popular motion of the day. Would you like to make it? Want to make it? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So passes. Thanks, everyone.